I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and today we're continuing our process, I guess kind of slowly, of working on the UNSC 3D printed Halo 3 Marine cosplay. And this is the part I'm working on in this episode. This is the lower back armor, and the gimmick here is taking something that has nice straight edges and mixing it with something that has a curved edge. So let's get started with this process. As usual with this costume, we start out here figuring out exactly what we're doing. But for the first part of the design process, we already kind of been through this, look at the reference image and come up with a sketch. So I'm going to work quickly through this particular part. Here's a basic shape of half of the lower back armor. A few notes with this particular piece is that the front part of the armor is actually a little bit narrower in height than the back part, so we got to take that into the 3D model. And also I'm even a little bit of a space right here where I'm going to later on add in a 3D printed hook, because there's a little bit of a loop type connector in the back, presumably for attaching something or another to the back piece of the armor. I've got my dimensions figured out, 5 inches wide for about half of it, 3.5 inches tall. Let me go ahead and make the final proper, quote, architectural design with proper dimensions. All right, so that was the easy part, because we're kind of looking at the piece dead on from behind. However, this piece does need to wrap around your back, because obviously your back, well, it's curved a little bit. And that is where this comes in. It's a piece of aluminum foil. And what this is really good at is you can bend it to hold a shape, and then I can kind of trace it out and figure out a certain curves. So I can hold this thing up to my back, to my lower back where the armor piece is going to sit, and I'll figure out what the curve of my back actually is. So here's the aluminum foil. I just measure the curve of my back. This inside line here, this would of course be where my back actually was. However, with this particular armor piece, I need to have a clip for the belt. And I'm also going to have some padding to let it fit snugly against my back. So what I am going to do is trace the back of the armor piece to be the outside of the aluminum foil. Therefore, I've got a little bit of space between the armor piece and my back. So I've drawn two lines down here following the two sides of the armor piece. So we have the outside and the middle. And then I can take this template here, kind of line up what looks to be about the middle, somewhere around there. That's probably close enough. And then I'm going to approximately trace the armor piece around like that. Let's clean up that curve just a little bit. Like I said, there's going to be padding here, so you don't have to have a perfect curve. But that's what the armor piece is going to look like from the top down. Because this is obviously directly, this one here is straight on from the back. This is looking top down. And I'm just going to arbitrarily choose, it's about an inch thick. And then I'm going to kind of just approximately retrace it, but when it comes to actual 3D model time, I will be able to use one of these two curves and just use it, you know, whatever I want to do it with. So that's what we're looking like. One last thing is I'm just going to draw in a little area right here. Let's do an inch and a half. Later on in this build process, I'm going to build a little bit of a clamp thing that's going to go in here, but that's probably not going to be at this episode. That's going to be when I get around to assembling this whole section of the armor. Alright, so now I've got both these two things done. This is probably enough to start work on the armor. Let's jump over to Blender 2.8 and get that process going. Alright, just like that, we're in Blender 2.8 with my reference image loaded in. This of course is Shift A, choose image reference, and if you want to see how I go from my drawings or templates or whatever it may be to Blender, the previous episode, episode 3, shows you how to use Photoshop to rotate these things and line them up. So now I've already done a lot of the basic modeling in previous tutorials, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and start by creating most of the outline of the back of the armor here. So let's just do add mesh plane and do some editing. So the basic shape is there, but we got a little bit of a roadblock. If you notice, the bottom of this armor piece is curved, but I've been working with straight lines all this time. Now in the previous episode, episode 3, I worked with some curves, But now I'm going to show you how you combine both those together and create an object that's got both curved sides as well as straight sides. So what we want to do is, first of all, get rid of this edge right here. So in the upper left-hand corner, let's select Edge Select Mode. That's that little icon right here in the group of 3 next to the Edit Mode drop-down box. We're going to click on this edge right here, hit X, choose only edges and faces for deleting. So what that does is it deletes the face and this edge, but leaves all the vertices intact. So we'll come back to this object in a moment. Press Tab to get out of edit mode. It's tricky to see, but your object is still there. You can see just a faint outline of it. And we're going to go into Shift A, Curve, and then Bezier Curve. So our Bezier curve is around here somewhere. It's actually hiding in line with the reference image. So if you press G, then Z, and pull up, you'll now see it here appear above the reference image. And the same thing is kind of actually the case with our plane we just worked with. So you can highlight that, press G and Z, and now you can see it sitting above the reference image. But let's go back to our curve. Tab to go into edit mode. Let's put our anchor points at the start and end of where these curves should be. I keep on a right click because that's Blender 2.7. And then we're going to adjust the handles on the anchor points. Oops, I got this in the wrong spot, don't I? My bad, I'll fix that in a minute. So we adjust the handles on the anchor points till we get a curve that more or less matches the shape we're trying to go for. That looks pretty good right there. Tab out of edit mode, back into object mode. So we're going to go up to the object drop-down menu up here, click that, convert to mesh from curve meta surface text. And now if we go back and press edit, we can see that there's actually individual line segments and vertices and stuff because it's now a mesh instead of a curve. With this curve selected, hold down Shift and left click on our plane. Or you can just do a box select and select everything. And you can see we've got everything selected now. We're going to do Control J, and that's going to join them into one object. Let's go back into edit mode, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with getting these things connected. Go back to vertex mode up here. So that's the first button by edit mode. Let's left click on that guy. Left click on this one. Alt M for merge and choose at last. So that's going to merge those 2 points together. And we'll do the same thing over here. Left click there, left click on the curve. Alt M at last. And then the last thing we need to do before we start making this into a 3D object is select these 2 vertices over here on the left hand side. And we're going to do our little scale trick to get them into a nice straight line. And that's in this case where I'm scaling them in the X direction over and over again a couple times in a row. And that'll get them lined up nice and straight. All right, so now you can see we've got a wireframe-ish. Huh. That doesn't look quite right, does it? We have a wireframe-ish of our shape. So let me jump into like the side view or front view, and we'll go into edit mode. Select everything, so press A, scale Z, and we'll do our little scaling trick, right? So we're going to scale things in the Z axis a few times. Never cross above the object. So in this case, I'm always staying below the object. And now it should be a nice flat plane. That little trick there is always good for whenever you have vertices that are not aligned on a plane. You want to align them along a particular axis or plane. Okay, back into edit mode. Make sure everything's selected. Press F. Now we generate a face. We have a solid object. This is essentially going to eventually be the back of our piece. But now we need to extrude it out. So let's go ahead and press E. And I'll get the exact height in a little bit. So for right now, just drag it up to the top somewhere, whatever looks good. But what we need to do is scale this piece a little bit, right? Because the top of the armor is a little bit smaller than the bottom part of the armor. You know, essentially, so the parts against your back is a little bit bigger in area than this top part. So I'm just going to first scale these top vertices along the y-axis a little bit, and then grab y until this way is about right. So that looks pretty good compared to you know, what we're trying to accomplish. So if I go back and rotate, you can see now, okay, it's got a little bit of a slope to it. Now next, I'm not going to scale because I don't want these vertices over here to move. I'm just going to select these two vertices and bring them in along the x-axis. So if let's go to solid mode. So now you can see that's kind of like the look we're going for, right? Where the top area is smaller than the bottom area. So we're off to a good start here. Now we need to worry about this curve. Here is how we're going to handle that. So let's get out of edit mode, tab out of it, and then press N, and that causes this little box to pop up for stats about the piece. I'm going to go to, let's go to our, pressing 3 on the numpad and give us our right orthographic view. So that's 3 and numpad 5 if we haven't been using orthographic view. Let's click on this piece, rotate it to its about vertical, and then you'll see over here one of the numbers will change. In this case, the x-axis. Just change that to 90, and now you know that it's vertical. And then I'm going to grab it along the y-axis, and I am going to start aligning it up like this. Let's go back into wireframe mode. Let's go tab mode. And then let me set so that's about the width I think I want to go for. I'll confirm that later, but that's about the width I'm thinking. All right, so how do we get it to curve along this shape here? This isn't as tricky as it might seem, because what you see here is we've already got some lines down here from our process of creating the curve. What we need to do is extend those lines all the way through the entire piece. So let's press A, so we have everything selected, and then we need to use our knife tool. So our knife tool is this little button right here. Here's our process for the knife tool. It gets a little weird. So make sure you have knife tool selected over here on the left-hand side. We're going to start with this vertice, click on it, press C to constrain the knife tool along a vertical path. C locks it into one of the 8 cardinal directions. And then we can click up here such that you can see the top edge is highlighted in green. So I now just kind of need to rotate my view around using my middle mouse button. And the angle should still be constrained until I go down here as I move my cut down to the bottom vertex in the back here. And you'll see the little edge next to it turns green. That's good. Click there and then hit enter. And what I've just done is cut a clean rib all the way through the piece. Let's run through that one more time because it is a little screwy. So we want to start in the front view, click on the vertice, press C to constrain in the vertical axis, stop when the top edge is highlighted in green, middle mouse button to rotate around to the back, and keep going back down until you hit the bottom here and you'll see one of the edges turn green. And then click and then hit enter. So we're going to repeat this process for the rest of the points of the curve. All right, now I've got to the end of the curve here, and we can cheat a little bit to make things go just a tiny bit faster. We still have our knife tool selected, but what we can do is click somewhere down here below the piece, press C, and then Z. Now nothing will change when you press Z, but what this is going to do is cut through the entire piece. Hit enter, and if I loop around, you can see I've got a line all the way through the piece. We're going to put one more of those in here, so let's click, so I don't know, somewhere around here, C and then Z, and then we'll cut all the way through our armor piece. So now it's time to make our piece line up with the curve that we worked on earlier. But what I need to do first is kind of refine this hand-drawn curve into something that looks halfway decent. I mean, it's one of those things, a hand-drawn curve looks all right, but once you start doing a more mechanical approach to it, it doesn't look quite as nice. So let's go back to object mode, tab out of there. I'm just going to move my piece of the armor just a little bit away, and I'm going to add a new curve. So let's go to Shift A, choose curve, Bezier curve, and do our little GZ trick. Oops, wrong way. There we go. So now I can see where it is. And I'm going to create a curve that lines up pretty good with the hand-drawn one, but it's going to be a nice, smooth, kind of mathematically correct curve. All right, there we go. I've put the curve to more or less how it would match the drawing I did earlier. And I did a lot of subdivides to make it even more of a nice smooth curve. So let's take our armor piece here. Let's select it, and I'm going to move it so that this corner is on top of the start point of the curve. Now let's go into edit mode. And I'm going to start by selecting all the kind of ribs that we cut earlier except for the very end point. And then I'm going to do G and then Y to move it until this point here in the rib is lined up with the curve. And I'm just going to repeat this process for every single rib. So I'm going to select every one but the one I just moved, and then we're going to line it up and keep going along. Okay, everything's lined up. So if I switch back to our solid mode here and look around, we should have an armor piece that looks like it's supposed to, but it's also nice and curved. That's looking really good. The last step I want to do is cut a little bit of a hole out here to where later on I'll build an anchor point. So yeah, it's, oh dear, it's boolean operation time. So I got the object selected over here in the right hand toolbar. We're going to change its name to loop cutout. So let's select our lower back armor piece. I've named it lower back armor just because, you know, why not? And then choose the modifiers tab, which is a little wrench. And we're going to choose Boolean operation. Difference is what we want. And the object is only the other one to choose from is loop cutout. And that might be all right. I don't think so, but we'll show you guys how to clean up a Boolean operation in just a moment. All right, let's hit apply. Let's click on our loop cutout piece. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this thing. Holy crap, it did it right. This is freaking amazing. I expect that to fail, but holy crap, that's correct. All right, well, that's going to make our life easier. So that is it for modeling our lower back armor piece. I'm going to print this thing out. Obviously, you know, it's kind of assumed at this point, but this is only half the lower back armor piece. You got to print this one out, then do a mirror image of it that's over here, and then we'll come back later and glue them all together. Here we are in Cura, and you know what? We skipped a step. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to size the armor. So this little guy here is like 3.3 by 1.7 by 2.3 millimeters. That's no good. I could actually probably just size it here in Cura, to be honest with you. I know that what is currently 3.3 millimeters should be 5 inches. So let's just scale it here in Cura and show you how to do that. So 5 inches times by 25.4 is 127 millimeters, because it's 25.4 millimeters per inch. And we're going to divide this now by 3.3. So we need to up it by 38.48 times. So let's click on our object. Let's go to scale. And percentage then would be 38.48. So that's 3,848 times. 3,448 times. 114 millimeters, eh? It's a little small. Did I get the right numbers in? I did not. 3,848 times. Sorry, whoops, oopsie daisy. Let's do the right numbers. 3,848 times. There we go. Now, that is about right for our armor piece. Unfortunately, with this particular piece here, we're going to need some sort of support, because there's no flat edges for it to print on. So what you need to do is just kind of fiddle around with it and figure out which side is going to be the easiest to print in terms of the amount of support you would need. As always, take a look at the layer view to make sure things are looking right. Yeah, that's what I want to see. And you see that white there? That is the breakaway material. So whereas normally that'd be normal PLAs, you have to then break off and sand down. You don't have to do that with the breakaway material. It's just absolutely incredible. It's one of those things where it's like, this is just makes the Ultimaker 3 well worth its money. So I'm going to go ahead and print this guy off in 3 hours and 36 minutes. And then we'll do a second one. And when that's all said and done with, we'll jump back over to the camera, get this thing assembled. I've got the 2 halves of the lower back armor printed up. And this is where I get to cheat a little bit. I was talking kind of mumbling, I think, when I was doing the modeling about the Ultimaker 3 and the fancy dual extrusion stuff. I got 2 plastics here. This is the obviously normal, fairly normal PLA. But then they've got something that Ultimaker makes called a breakaway material, and I use that for support material. So whereas normally with a single extruder printer you would have to use the same PLA for the structure as well for the support, this is a special type of plastic that bonds pretty well to PLA, but it breaks free very cleanly. So let's get started with that process and run through the assembly. For assembling this, once I get the pieces a little bit cleaned up, all I'm going to do is use a combination of super glue as well as epoxy to glue the 2 halves together. So with that, let's call this stage of the build complete. I'm thinking the next episode, we're going to go back, revisit all these pieces, and kind of bring them together to finish up a section of the Marine armor. But for now, thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get the latest project in this series, as well as things like building microflash, painting miniatures, and other fun projects like that. So until next time, have a great week. And now for an after credits bonus fact. When you see my safety goggles up here, you know they're kind of staged. I put them there intentionally because if I was actually using them, were heading on my face and I slid them up, what I do is I push them up like that to where it moves my hair out of the way. So if they're like this, where my hair is moved out of the way, I was actually wearing them. If they're like this, well, that means I just put them there for effect. All right, guys, have a great week.